Hey guys, what's up? MadSeason here, back with another video for you. As you know, many new features came along with this expansion: world quests, Mythic Plus, artifacts, new legendaries, etc. I thought now that the expansion is 5 months old, we've gotten enough playtime in to tell if these are successes or not. So in this video, I wanted to talk about Mythic Plus dungeons specifically, since it's a discussion I found myself having a lot recently. I want to talk about the good and the bad, and take a thorough look at them to see how well they fared throughout this expansion so far. Keep in mind that this is just all my opinion. Opinions are not facts, and everyone has one. I encourage you to share yours. So in my opinion, I think Mythic Pluses are a pretty big success, so this video will basically be me pitching to you and explaining why I think that, and will also bring up some arguments against them and debate that a bit. The first thing I think that's a positive that I'd like to tackle is that it's a comparable alternative to endgame as opposed to the standard rating. Let me put you into my perspective. I started this game way back in early 2005 and played fairly consistently up to today. I was a pretty hardcore raider in Vanilla and the Wrath of the Lich King expansion before it just started to get too much of a time investment for me when I got out of college and into the real world and yada yada. Getting together even 10 people, recruiting members, setting schedules, combined with the actual length of the raid is a tall order for a lot of people. As fun as raiding was for me, it got to the point to where it wasn't something I was willing to invest 2 to 4 hours a day on, which I think is a pretty common length for raids even today. And at the end of the day, that's what MMOs are mainly for, right? Tackling on the new raid and grinding out that endgame. The only other alternative really is PvP, but on the PvE side of things, if you don't push endgame content, you're missing out on a huge aspect of the game. LFR kind of artificially fills this hole, but only in the sense of just seeing what the bosses in the raid looks like. I think we can all agree that the challenge aspect isn't there. So the reason why I like Mythic Pluses so much is that it's filled a hole that myself and I think a lot of people have had for quite a while now, and that's an endgame that's still challenging, but not super time consuming. Only requiring 5 people makes them very quick to get off the ground. Having 4 friends is much more common and realistic than having 9, and because of that, I find that I can log in at pretty much any time and ask my guild if they want to knock out a quick Mythic Plus or 2, and people will be game. That's much more difficult to do with 10-man raids. The gear that's awarded can also be pretty good, of course depending on what levels you're completing, and the fact that they scale infinitely ensures that there's always a challenge aspect to it. Over the years we've had heroic, mythic, and challenge dungeons, but their difficulty is static and you can always surpass it with time and gear. The exception to the gear part would be challenge dungeons since they scaled you down, but still, once you're able to do it, you're able to do it. There was no way you could increase that difficulty. But now with the infinite scaling of Mythic Plus, you don't have that limit and you're guaranteed to be pushed to your limits if you want to. Taking out a high level key with just seconds to spare is one of the great feelings this game has for me right now, and it's something I really love about it. And I also like how ripe it is for updates. You not only have new dungeons, but the option to add new affixes. And something I think would be cool is if you can do special challenges to add to your time. For example, a tough side boss like the ones you need for the world quests. Maybe if you take those out, they give you a minute or 2, or give you a big damage boost for a few minutes or something like that. It's a system that benefits from being able to add stuff to it easily, which I think is great for the long term. So, onto some of the arguments against them. One of the biggest criticisms I think is that it breaks the mold of the classic dungeons are for pre-raid gearing and raiding should be the only endgame. I kind of disagree with this mentality for a couple of reasons. It's basically from what I explained earlier, but I'll reiterate it. Endgame is the big prize for any MMORPG, and it's typically reserved for 10+ player raids. In my opinion, this system is dated, and I think more options are good. Once again, this is just me, but I don't agree with the fact that to experience endgame on the PvE side of things and you want a challenge, you have to invest the amount of time needed for gathering 10 people up for raiding. And the second point I'd like to bring up is that raiding is still of course an option for the endgame. It's not like Mythic Plus is the ultimate endgame challenge and raiding is thrown to the wayside. Raiding is still the main event in terms of endgame, which is the way it should be, I think. I don't think raiding itself is dated. I think having only raiding as an endgame for PvE is dated. Mythic Plus is just a less hardcore endgame while at the same time being comparable to raiding, once you get up there in keystone levels at least. There's been a sentiment that just the existence of Mythic Plus alone makes raiding less impactful, and it's something I just don't get, I guess. I think it's better and more healthy for the game to have different routes to go down. Another complaint I see is that they're repetitive. Well, I agree with this, but I disagree with the fact that it's a bad thing. In my opinion, that's all what MMOs are. It's grinding repetition, but if that repetition is fun, then there's no problem. Just think about it, it's pretty much everything in the entire game. You do the same world quests over and over, the same battlegrounds over and over, the same raids, etc. And it's true with any MMO, that's what makes them MMOs. Patches with new stuff come every few months and not every day, and it's just their nature. And for the sake of argument here, if you want to compare them directly to raiding, they're actually less repetitive. So far, as of this video, Legion has 3 raids and 11 dungeons. So already much more variety due to raw numbers, but something else you have to consider is that Mythic Pluses have 10 wildcard affixes, and some of these completely change the way you run them. They're randomized on a weekly basis and they have some really nasty combos, so it has a nice variety in that sense as well. The only thing with raiding that's comparable to this as far as I know is that some bosses get more abilities in heroic or mythic modes. Also, like I mentioned earlier, they're so easy to add stuff onto, especially since they aren't really established yet. And what I mean by that is, if you add some major change to raiding, it'll be much more volatile since raiding has been around since the beginning of the game. Mythic Plus dungeons have that advantage of being pretty new, so changing something in a big way or adding onto it won't be as volatile. So, while raiding is the core of the endgame, Mythic Plus is something they can experiment with more freely without a huge backlash from the player base. And back to the subject of repetitiveness, we're also getting new dungeons along with the new raids that most major patches get. When we got the Trial of Valor, we got the Mighty Karazhan dungeon, and when we get the Tomb of Sargeras in patch 7.2, we'll get the Cathedral of the Eternal Night. So, that's about it. All in all, I think they're pretty good. They certainly aren't perfect. Some of the affixes could use some tuning, and there's always room for improvement in general, but I think as a whole, they've been a good thing for the game. They've been really well received by my circle of friends for sure, and it's something I hope they continue for future expansions. But like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, it's all just my opinion. If you disagree with what I've said, that's fine. I'm not saying you're wrong, and I encourage you to share your thoughts so people can get insight on your point of view. It's all about perspective, and like I mentioned, my perspective is as someone who plays fairly casually and avoids hardcore raiding. Whatever your opinion is though, most importantly, I hope you found the video entertaining or informative in some way. I also hope you found it helpful. Give it a like if you liked it, and if you really liked it, let me know in the comments and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching, good luck, and peace.